Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are, to all of our attendees, and welcome to TME Presents, Delivering Solutions with a Sense of Urgency. You've read the article, now learn the rest of the story. I'm Daniel Wheatley, the Associate Editor for the Military Engineer, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here today. Before we get started, though, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. All the attendees are in a listen-only mode for the presentation. You can use the chat pane for any general discussion and to chat with other attendees. Let's try this now by typing in where you're listening from today. For me, it's sunny Northern Virginia. You can submit questions for the presenter at any time by using the questions pane on your control panel. We will collect these and address as many as we can during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Please also submit any technical issues you may be encountering here as well. Originally published in the November-December 2020 issue of TME, Delivering Solutions with a Sense of Urgency discussed how Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Command Pacific is implementing changes for how it engages industry, as well as making strategic improvements to project delivery and execution to become a more agile command that challenges the status quo and moves with the speed and agility that the future demands. And it is my pleasure now to introduce the author of the article and today's featured presenter, Rear Admiral John Adametz, Commander, Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Command Pacific and Pacific Fleet Civil Engineer. Rear Admiral Adametz, the floor is yours, so please take it away.
All right, thank you, Daniel. Appreciate that. Appreciate everybody tuning in. A warm aloha and good morning from sunny Honolulu, Pacific Fleet, and the Makalapa compound here at Pearl Harbor. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started, I want to tell you it's always a pleasure to participate in Society of American Military Engineers and do these kinds of forums. I've also had the opportunity over the last couple of years to engage with Mr. Roland de Guzman, the leader of the Leadership Development Program, where we've done a bunch of seminars. And so my point with that is if you're considering volunteering with SAME, it's not a bad place. You could really make a difference with a lot of folks, and they're always looking for volunteers. So thank you for that, and thanks for the opportunity again, Daniel, to talk about where NAVFAC is heading and how we're engaging with industry and where we can use some help from the members of SAME. All right, so listen, this article was published last year in the November-December issue of SAME, the Military Engineer. And what it did was capture kind of where NAVFAC is going. And NAVFAC is going in the direction of being a credible, trustworthy organization that delivers what we say we're going to do. We want a say-do ratio of 1-to-1, meaning we're going to commit to doing something, we want to perform. And that's where we need your help in industry. For us to do that, we recognize that what we've done in the past is not going to cut it in the future. And so it's not about just getting our military construction projects and our operation support projects, environmental and designs and all that stuff awarded. It's delivering the readiness to the warfighter. And so we're looking more holistically on how we actually achieve that perform to plan and move with a sense of urgency. So what I'd like to do today is just tell you about kind of what we've learned over the last couple of years, where we're headed, and where we can use your continued engagement. I think we have an hour scheduled today, so I'll stop talking about 30 minutes, and hopefully we'll have some great dialogue through the chat room, and I'll be able to answer any questions you may have. What I'd like to do is give you an overview of the Pacific, not just from the NAVFAC perspective, but also as my role as the Pacific Fleet Civil Engineer. All right, Daniel, if we can move to the next slide, please, that would be great. So many of you are aware of the Pacific is a very dynamic place with a complex security environment. And so I'd just like to cover a couple of these pictures. Many of them maybe you have seen or are familiar with. But our pacing threat on the left is China. They're our largest trading partner and potential adversary. What we would like in the Pacific, in the Navy and our national defense, is another 75, 80 years of freedom. And that means freedom with a free and Indo-Pacific region where every country has the opportunity to prosper economically. We believe in rights and human dignity and ethical treatment of all, and a rules-based international order on laws of the sea. And so what you have here up in the upper left is the Chinese maritime fleet, and these are the fishing vessels and other security vessels that the Chinese Communist Party enlists into their navy. In the middle left, on the far left, is one of the structures. I'm not going to call it an island. The structure that China has built in the South China Sea by dredging and has militarized with weapon systems. Obviously, they have a growing military. The People's Liberation Army, the PLA Navy, is their Navy part of that. In the middle, you have our adversary, North Korea, and their nuclear program. In the middle, you have a resurgent Russia with President Putin and their desire to be a world player on the world stage. Obviously, violent extremism and terrorism, it continues to be a concern. And on the far right, environmental security to many of our Pacific nations is a huge concern, not just with destructive weather events, but also the sea level rise, climate change is a threat. So a lot of challenges in the Pacific, a very dynamic place, not to mention the population growth. When you look at the demographics in the Pacific region, from Africa through South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Oceania, we have major population growth, a very young population, and you throw that in with all these other things that are going on, you have a very complex security environment. Next one, Daniel. Thank you, sir. All right, so what's the military doing to respond to this? You've heard over the last decade with the previous two administrations, pivot to the Pacific, rebalance to the Pacific. This is all about posture and force structure. And so these pictures here are some of our most critical weapons platforms that we use to project power and maintain that peace with freedom. And so you think about this, where does SAME come into this? Well, to project that power, you have to have readiness from the shore in terms of platforms to launch from, to train from, to house our people and care for our families, and all the things that you need to do, trainers, ports, airfields, runways, all kinds of facilities, communication stations that you need to deliver that readiness. And so with every one of these major programs comes the infrastructure component. And what I'm going to talk about a little bit is it's not just at our major operating bases anymore. When you think of approved naval concepts such as distributed maritime operations and expeditionary advanced base operations, think about places, not bases, and I'll talk about that a little more in the future. Next slide, Daniel. Thank you, sir. So this is NAVFAC's Laydown. We are NAVFAC Engineering Systems Command. We are the original systems command of the Navy, started in the 1840s, confirmed as a systems command, the original one in 1960, and we continue today. We're one of two Department of Defense construction agents, Army Corps of Engineers being the other, and we're geographically laid out across the globe. In the Pacific, we have the western half of the U.S., west of the Mississippi to India. Some of you have said that's polar bears to penguins, Hollywood to Bollywood. All right, so we're all over the Pacific here in the western part of the U.S. Next slide. All right, and this is our strategic focus. Everybody has a strategic plan, and this is ours. We want to enable warfighter lethality. We want to maximize that readiness from the shore to enable and project that power. And we also recognize that And to do that, we have to care for our people. And NAVFAC has about 20,000 people globally, everything from planners, engineers, designers, construction oversight, utilities, environmental, across the complete spectrum, life cycle spectrum of infrastructure. And to deliver what our nation needs, we have to care for our people. So we invest a lot in ensuring they're ready both technically, professionally, and their soft skills to lead. So this is all about quality, speed, and agility, because what we've done in the past is not going to be good enough for the future. We have to learn to be more agile and deliver faster. I call it the quintuple constraints: cost, quality, and time, with ethics and safety being the number 4 and 5. We want to deliver within the quintuple constraints. Next slide, please. All right, so here's our focus area. And we can't talk about our focus areas in the Pacific without talking about great power competition. Many of you know how President Xi came to power in China by eliminating his adversaries, as well as consolidating power. And he did it on a platform of eliminating corruption. And so now you have a much more centralized communist party, centralized power, that what their stated goals are to dominate the Pacific by 2045. This is no secret. They're not bashful about saying it. And here's the deal. It's all about access to resources. In other words, if you're 300,000 Chinese Communist Party members and you want to care for 1.4 billion Chinese people, ethnic Chinese, well, then you have to make it so that their future is better than their parents, and they see their children's future to be better than theirs. And, well, how do you do that? Well, you have to have resources to do that, and you have to grow your economy. And so this whole business about the 9-dash line and the South China Sea being their historic rights, that's already been decided in a court. Nobody really buys it. And listen, it's about garnishing resources, whether it's Africa, South Asia, or wherever, because to grow that economy, you need those resources. And that's really what One Belt, One Road is all about, and this access to the economic exclusion zones in the South China Sea. It's about controlling bandwidth, controlling petroleum resources, controlling fishing areas, and enabling to grow the economy. But look, China's our biggest trading partner, and there's nothing, we have nothing against the Chinese people. We just don't like the way that our stuff gets stolen, and we don't like debt diplomacy and everything short of armed conflict we call gray warfare, and we just want them to play fair. No issue with them being a world power. It's just, look, hey, we want a free and open Indo-Pacific where everybody can thrive. All right, so that's great power competition, and that's what really this is all about, what we do every day on the U.S. Pacific Fleet, ensuring we can preserve that peace. I mentioned distributed maritime operations. That's where the Navy and the military is heading, and so we recognize that we cannot just operate from our main operating bases, but we have to be distributed across the globe to deliver repair, refuel, revitalize, rearm, those 5 R's of what we need to do to fight and win. Expeditionary construction will be a major part of that. Obviously, we're tied in with the United States Marine Corps. The Commandant and the Chief of Naval Operations have signed doctrine to work closer together. And so where does NAVFAC fit into all this? Well, we do contingency contracts. We have global contracts for services and construction, operational support contracting. We provide planning support and NEPA support, environmental support for exercises. We execute emergency MILCON. Matter of fact, we have about $3 billion going on right now in China Lake at the Naval Air Warfare Center, the weapons division there, where we had a major earthquake a little less than a year and a half ago. Matter of fact, that was a great partnership between industry and how we were able to partner with all the stakeholders, legislators, environmental regulators, planners, everything to get that program off the ground there's many more that I'll talk about here in a minute. We recognize on the bottom right that we can't do it alone, and we have to have partner nations to help us with this effort. And so access and working closely with our partners in Australia and other locations is vital to our success in the Pacific. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so what can we learn here? And this is just a compilation of some of the things that we've learned from industry over the last couple of years and how we're using data to help inform our decisions. And so we have often thought of our qualitative talents and skills, that our gut and our experience, our experiential kind of knowledge on making decisions. And over the last few years, we've placed a heavy emphasis on getting our data accurate, our systems working well, and then leveraging the data, visualizing that and using that to help us with our decisions. So now, not only qualitative decisions, but combining the quantitative element. What is our data telling us? Is that validating what we thought or disproving it? And how do we optimize our decisions? So NAVFAC is heavily focused on leveraging data and using that. One of the things we've learned from industry is key performance indicators, both in our pre-award as well as our post-award. And so the idea here that we've learned from you is that when a project starts going off the rails, we notice it from our data, we notice it earlier, and we're able to swarm to solve it. And it's made a huge difference. Over the last couple of years, we started at about 45% of executing our military construction projects. Last year, we were over 90%. We're still having some challenges in post-award, and that's where we can improve our pre-award, and I'll talk a little bit about that later in the brief. But nevertheless, we are learning a tremendous amount from you, and these key performance indicators and swarming are really helping us deliver on time, on plan. This chart many of you have seen before. That we call this our tadpole chart. And while you may not be able to see all the numbers that go with it, but imagine a standard S-curve in a construction project where you start off a little flat, hit the steeper slope vertical part, and then finish a little flat as you come into the red zone. One of the things we've been focused on over the last couple of years is the green zone. And if you notice all those tadpoles that are below the chart on the lower left, below the standard S-curve, this is because of us and you. And what we've learned is we lose about 30% or 50% almost in some extreme cases of our time after we award, going back and forth between submittals and pre-construction conferences and site approvals and permits and mobilization and all this kind of stuff. Look, once we hit our standard, our stride, we mirror the standard S-curve. And so the productivity matches what you would see on a normal construction project. The challenge is we're phase shifted to the right, and so we end up finishing late. So what we've recognized is not just talk about the red zone at the end, but focus on the green zone in the beginning. In other words, if you win a contract with NAVFAC, if you're not getting the call the day or the next day to congratulate you on the award, when are you going to start, then I need to do a better job, because that's where we're headed, that's where we want to go. And anything that we can do to facilitate that starting early, that mobilizing earlier, you having your plans ready, your submittals ready, and us approving them in a timely fashion can really help us together deliver. Ultimately for us, we do our mission, we deliver on plan with a sense of urgency, and you make a fair profit and move on to the next one with a great CPARS. That's what this is all about, a partnership and teamwork to deliver that readiness that our nation needs. All right, next one, Daniel. How we doing on time? Time check, we're doing okay. All right, so it's not, we're taking these analytics one step further. So it's not just about looking backward, but we want to look forward. And you've heard of machine learning, artificial intelligence. That's where we're heading. What can we predict? What can we learn from our past? And so, you know, not just what happened and why did it happen. That's kind of where we are today. Where we're heading is that predictive, that operations analysis, that modeling, that machine learning, that leveraging data, the next step of leveraging the information that we have to predict and modify our behavior and our processes so that we can further deliver with accuracy. Yeah, pretty excited about this. All right, next one. All right, again, so this is it, upper left, this is a picture that was at China Lake. I think we had, on several occasions, more than 400 participants. Obviously, this one was right before COVID happened, and so if we had to do the same thing today, it would be a little more spread out, a lot more virtually, and we would have our masks on. Nevertheless, we've adapted, like many of you have, to a virtual environment. And we recognize that, hey, the pluses and minuses of that, some things we just cannot do virtually, soil boring and other sampling and things like that. Other things we've adapted quite well. Meetings, site visits, use of drones for intelligence and spreading kind of what the site conditions are, progress. A lot of areas we're using technology where we didn't in the past. We recognize that, hey, one of the things that we're missing with our virtual operations is that human element, that discussion at the water cooler about something, that hearing what's going on around you and adding in that value, and not just that, but the camaraderie and the teamwork. Nevertheless, we recognize that if we went back to the way we were before COVID, that's probably not a good thing. We view that as a failure. The Navy sees our opportunity to reduce footprint, to do things more efficiently, to have access to the best talent through virtual operations is the way to go. So we'll have a much larger virtual presence than we did pre-COVID. Nevertheless, hey, these industry engagements haven't stopped just like today. We're not doing this on-site, we're doing it virtually, and we're able to communicate and just about get everything that we wanted to pre-COVID. So we'll continue with our partnering efforts. We have a much more expanded partnering program. We're engaging with industry. Anytime we go on a site visit or if you're in town, we want to engage with you. We want to learn from you, as well as professional organizations such as SAME, AGC, ABC, and others. All right, so on the bottom, we look at what are we doing differently and what have we learned from industry in terms of our delivery strategies. We've learned a lot. We've learned that draft RFPs are helpful, but not as helpful as if we can have the forum where we can have the dialogue and go back and forth. Several flavors of early contractor involvement and integrated project delivery. We're exploring use of advanced work packaging through the Construction Industry Institute and others who've had success primarily in the oil and gas industry, but we're on a journey to apply advanced work packaging as a federal owner on a federal project, infrastructure project, not just in the oil and gas industry where you deliver work-face packages, and work-face materials and engineering all just in time. How do we leverage this concept that's worked well in other industries and for other owners with the federal government? Guaranteed maximum price. I had the opportunity to visit one of my peers in the University of Washington the other day in Seattle, and he said, "Hey, John, look, we don't have cost overruns and time overruns. We always perform on plan, and we do that through guaranteed maximum price. And so what changes if there's changed conditions is the scope. And so it's just another way of looking at things. If we want to perform the plan, hey, what can I fix such that I deliver on plan?" And so that has been successful with the University of Washington. I had the opportunity to meet with a couple other of our industry partners where we talked about GCCM or CMGC, Construction Management General Contract, Construction Management at Risk, where it's much more of a collaborative, negotiated procurement. Many of the industry partners that I've engaged with are leaning more toward reputation and past performance and negotiated procurements and delivery rather than hard bid. I know for a fact many of you do not like low price technically acceptable. I think it's fine for certain projects that are not very complex, that are kind of routine. Other things, maybe like some of our large mega projects with our shipyards and others, I think a more collaborative approach would be best. And so that's kind of where you're headed, what we've learned from industry, and that's where NAVFAC is heading. We need your help to help us get there. Next slide, please. All right, so this just shows a little bit of our ramp up. Last year, NAVFAC Pacific did $8 billion in operations. NAVFAC as a total did $15 billion. That was the third most in our entire history, and we have a lot more work coming. We cannot succeed without our industry partners. I implore you to bring your A game, and I need to do that every single day as well with our team here. Let's learn together. We have a lot of work going on. In Guam there in the upper right is Camp Blas, newly commissioned, first Marine Corps base that's been commissioned in over 50 years. That's a 625-acre construction site where designed to relocate Marines from Okinawa to Guam. On the lower right is our dry dock replacement project that's in planning right now at the shipyard at Pearl Harbor. We also have several other projects going on around the globe for our shipyard infrastructure optimization program, also known as SIOP. Just some examples on the design and construction side of just the massive amount of growth that will continue for several years here in the Pacific around the globe. So cannot succeed without industry. That's why I'm on the line here today with you. Next slide. All right, so the other part of that, a big part of our business volume is our operations and services. We awarded our next generation base operations support contract in Guam recently. That was a $900 million effort, and we incorporated all of these initiatives that we've learned from industry. Better inventory, predictive maintenance, incentive fees, things like that will help us with our facilities, operations, and services. Utilities, it continues to be a big deal for us. Originally, it was all about renewables. If you remember a few years ago, we were pushing for 1 gigawatt of renewables, and we achieved that goal through the help of the Department of the Navy, the Secretariat. A lot of it was in Hawaii and California, Public Utilities Commission, the Governor's Office, and through partnership with industry. And so now we have a program that we've been under for the last few years of resiliency, redundancy, and efficiency. So it's not just about how efficient we can get, that's important, but it's also about resiliency and redundancy. How do we use those renewables? How do we island our bases? How do we have backup systems in case the primary delivery method of the utility is compromised? And so those are the 3 R's of where we're headed with our utility infrastructure. Will continue to be a big deal for us because our utility bill, about $1 billion both on the shore and the fleet. So we need to be able to be more efficient as well as have that resiliency and redundancy. A lot of work still remains there, and of course, I'll talk a little bit about that with what we're learning from the new administration and their priorities. All right, next slide. All right, environmental and energy continues to be a big deal. I mentioned our utilities. So, we want to accomplish our mission in the Navy. Part of my job as the Pacific Fleet Civil Engineer is prudent stewardship of our maritime training ranges from Fallon to Marianas to Southern Cal, Hawaii, and Gulf of Alaska, and the Pacific Northwest. We have several ranges, and we want to accomplish our mission, and we also value being prudent stewards of the environment. And so we're very proud of our environmental record. We obviously recognize we have challenges, and we take those head on. But your ability to help us not only with the planning effort, but in sustainment and operations from an environmental front will continue to be critical to us. We don't know exactly how the military or DOD will play in the infrastructure improvement legislations that's coming. We do know that climate change is a big deal to us because many of our installations are on the coastal regions and are susceptible to sea level rise. And so that's an issue that we'll have to address as well as renewables. Now, let me talk about renewables a little bit. I mentioned the 1 gigawatt that we did before. There's still a lot of opportunity here. Every time you think of, say, hey, all the low-hanging fruit has been harvested in terms of UESCs, utility engineering service contracts, and energy savings performance contracts, you find another facility that can use some efficiency. And so we're looking at smart cities, smart grids, renewables, solar, battery storage technology has really come a long way, as well as connectivity and how we connect all this and build the installations of the future. I think the Air Force has done great in this space as well. But again, how do we leverage technology to help us on the energy front? All right, next slide, please. All right, so cybersecurity is a big deal. I mentioned people stealing our stuff and hacking our systems, and that's a real threat that happens every day, and we have to be prepared for that. NAVFAC is the ATO, the authority to operate. We grant approval, ATO, on our facility-related control systems, our industrial control systems. Our goal is to match or exceed industry standards on our ability to commission our systems, our SCADA and our facility control systems at the same time as we commission our other parts of our facility. It's like today, we turn over the new car with the dashboard, and we have the structural, mechanical, electrical, all these systems commissioned. We cut the ribbon, and we say, hey, it's going to be 6 months to a year before we get certified on all the new systems that help us be more efficient in operating the facility. NAVFAC recently built a cyber systems test bed at our Warfare Center, where we do research and development for facilities engineering. And this test bed, ideally, will be open to contractors to use to help test the systems virtually prior to installing them in the facility and having to do it in series. We want to be able to do it in parallel and have these systems available with approval to operate when we commission the facility. This is a big deal to us. All of our data centers, our mission assurance for our critical facilities, we want to be out in front of our ability to prevent and harden our facilities, as well as detect those that are trying to put day zeros or other things into our systems to compromise our systems from a cyber perspective. Huge deal to us, and one that we're ultimately focused on and are meeting head on. Next slide, please. So it all starts with our asset management and real estate. One of the things that the Secretary of the Navy has put on the department, or the Navy as well as the DOD initiative, is FIR. That's Financial Integrity and Audit Readiness. Understanding of what we have in inventory. And quite frankly, we hadn't done a good job of this in decades. And so there's been a focus on our asset management, not only knowing what we have, but leveraging all of our technology, our GIS and other things, so that we can keep that inventory much more efficiently and operate our installations much more efficiently. FIR is a big deal to us, as well as other planning, because we recognize if we don't plan well, then things don't get delivered on time and when we have challenges. And so we're engaging in planning in all of these large programs, not just for the Navy, but for the Marine Corps, Air Force, and other DOD agencies that we support. We also are leveraging our assets in third-party financing, public-private, we call them P3, public-private partnerships, public-private ventures, such as what we have with our housing program, as well as others. And on the bottom there, you see the Broadway project, which was going on for a long time. We recently closed the deal. The building on the right is a 17-story government administrative facility where we were able to consolidate government activities in exchange for that 15-acre site, 99-year lease to Manchester Development Corporation for retail, office space, and other things. So that's one example. There are several more that we're planning on how do we leverage our assets to achieve what we need in infrastructure. Obviously, everybody knows our military construction program. We always have more requirements than what we have funding. So this is just another way to do that. Floating dry dock, we recently did this as well in south of the Naval base at San Diego, where we need more dry dock capacity. And then we're still planning for a large expansion of the Fallon Range Training Complex so that we can test our weapon systems properly with the latest technology. And so those are just some in the planning and asset management area of things that we're working on. I expect this area to be more expanded in the future as we consolidate in some areas and leverage our assets in others to achieve what our priorities are in terms of delivering that readiness from the shore. Next slide. All right, so this is the last one here on how to do business with us. You've told us, you've told NAVFAC that, hey, the more amount of time, the better you know about what work is coming up, and the more amount of time you have, the easier it is for you to plan. You can see what work we have coming up. You're able to understand where you might be able to differentiate and be competitive, where you can form joint ventures and partnerships, and it just gives you a lot more time to prepare your proposals and your bids and get ready. We ultimately recognize that you have a choice within your business development capacity. NAVFAC wants to be that owner of choice for you. Not that you have to do business with NAVFAC, but you want to do business with NAVFAC. So anything we can learn on helping you within the constraints of the FAR and other things on what we can tell you, we want to be able to do that because we recognize that's going to provide for a better outcome. And so draft RFPs, early industry engagement, industry involvement, ECI, AWP, all those things that we're talking about, that's where we want to go. A much more collaborative partnership when delivering projects. These are all our websites in the Pacific on where you can find our work. They're generally updated once a month, once a quarter. We continue to learn and improve. For example, someone told me the other day, hey, it's good that you tell us, this was from our architect engineer, it's good that you tell us what work you have coming up. Now, if you can do better in telling us whether you're going to design the work in-house with your in-house talent or whether you're going to put it on the street, that would help us plan and form our partnerships and staff accordingly so that we can deliver you that quality on time within the budget. And so how to do business with NAVFAC, I've listed the sites here. I know that Daniel and others at SAME will post this brief, so you'll have those links. And look, we're always interested in how we can improve. Trust me, it's not going to reflect poorly on you. We actually look at it as a help. Say, hey, look, if we have a team member that's not returning phone calls, not providing you the information that you need, being a partner, then, hey, it's not a bad thing. We're not going to go hammer that person. What we want to do is walk toward and run toward problems so that we can solve them. And we need everybody on the same page. With all that said, you have my continued commitment to bring the A game from NAVFAC. Always open to how we can improve. I ask that you do the same. So let me pause there and just tell you again how thankful I am to share some time with you today. And I look forward to having some dialogue in the rest of the time remaining.
All right, thank you so much, Rear Admiral. I really appreciate that. I just want to take a quick second here to say, if you want those website links in here, they are available under the Handouts tab. Just click on there. The whole slide deck is available for download, so you can get those, take them back, make sure that, reference them later on when you're looking for work and to do business with NAVFAC. So I want to encourage everybody, we're going to open it up for some Q&A here. So if you've got questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A tab. You can go through there. If you see something that somebody else has kind of already put in there for your question, feel free to upvote it. It will help it rise up to the top so we can see what's on your mind, what questions you have here. So keep them coming in as we get started here. So the first question here from Brian Weinstein, I think. I'm sorry if I mispronounce anybody's name here. He says, love to see the discussion on alternative project delivery. With several large projects looming, will we see these approaches on some of these? How can industry help you get there quicker?
Yes, thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Brian. That is Brian Weinstein, former Captain Brian Weinstein, Navy Civil Engineer Corps officer, and our longtime partner now on the industry side, doing great things with Stantec. So, Brian, thanks for the question. Always a pleasure. Yeah, so I think that these kinds of forums and your willingness to offer candid advice on how NAVFAC can improve and some of the things that Stantec is doing and your industry partners as examples is very helpful. As you know, at times we get into our comfort zone and we don't want to be in the comfort zone. We want to be in the learning zone. And not in chaos, but in the learning zone. And so providing examples, for example, we've been working with the CII on AWP, and we had a few forums on that, which we've learned a ton. But one of the things we've asked for and we continue to look for is, hey, can someone tell me where we've used AWP on a federal project with a federal owner on an infrastructure project? Meaning we found them successful in oil and gas industry where AWP has been applied. We found them in infrastructure in the non-federal sector, but find me one that's done it in the federal sector. And I don't mean that, hey, we can't be the first. I want to be on the leading edge. I just don't want to be on the bleeding edge. And so if you can help me shape on how we can do that, that would be very helpful. Here's another one. We are getting more comfortable with ECI. ECI, early contractor involvement, integrated project delivery, means different things to different people. And we're starting to warm up. It's starting to gain speed and understanding in NAVFAC. But those examples of, in an ideal case, where we've used it in the federal government elsewhere, so we just have a model that we can plagiarize, or say, hey, we used it over here and with this agency, GSA or the VA or Smithsonian or somewhere else. We learned some things there. Here's a way that you could use it, NAVFAC, and incorporate those lessons learned. So you're not starting from scratch. Here's a model. It worked okay. Here's how you can make it better. I think that's very, very helpful because it helps us get past the, gee, I really don't know how to do this. It sounds great, but I have this consternation. And so, Brian, hopefully that answered your question. As you know, doors always open, as it is to all of our partners, and we love that kind of engagement. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Like I said, keep questions coming in, everyone. So here's a question that I had here. I have the privilege of kind of looking ahead some of the reports that are coming out for the military engineer here. And in particular, the upcoming service report from Riarman Korka here talks about some of the work that you guys are doing on Camp Blaz. And in particular, I was interested in the changes that you have made for some of the pre-construction and contracting for Camp Blaz, in particular in regards to the the COVID pandemic. What are some of the lessons that you might have learned from going through that on such a a massive infrastructure project? And do you anticipate adapting any of those or continuing any of them in the future?
Yeah, so I'll talk about three that come to mind as we talk about the large effort that's going on Guam with Camp Blaz and what's planned for other areas, Marianas, Guam, and Tinian. The first one would be common components. And so, as you know, NAVFAC put out a policy that we want to standardize common components across the installation. For example, elevators, facility control systems, locks, and things like that. And so it's a balance, right? One of the things the FAR says we have to do is full and open competition. So there's a balance between complete full and open competition, and total cost, total ownership cost to the Navy. For example, if we have disparate systems at a place like Guam, where it's logistically, it's very challenging, the tyranny of distance, the time to get parts, stocking parts, and the whole logistics supply chain component of that, the cost of doing business with full and open competition. So what we've done is compromised some to find a happy medium. And so we've recognized in 7 or 8 areas where we want to have common components that, you know, from the complete life cycle, and when you look at from an in-service engineering perspective, life cycle logistics of what the component is originally, specifying what we want. Let's just say it's a control system in this case. We want to standardize that across the installation. Then you are able to stock certain components, your operations in terms of open architecture, of how you operate those systems, the training involved for either the contractors or our in-house workforce to do maintenance on the systems, and then ultimately replacement. That's a big deal to us. So we can't just look at the capital investment, we have to look at the total cost. And that's where common components comes in. And we've written justifications and approval for these common components to justify other than full and open competition where it makes sense to the taxpayer and the federal government from a complete total ownership cost perspective. That's one. The second one, we can't talk about Guam without talking about munitions of explosive concern. And I can tell you our processes from where we started 3 to 5 years ago on dealing with mech, as we call it there, have come a long, long way. We're getting out of the ground now, and it's much less of a concern because if we find it, we know how to deal with it. The processes for dealing with it are much better. We recently cleared the entire site with a modification to one of our contracts down to 4 feet or bedrock, whichever comes first. Now, I'm not saying if you're going to work in Guam or the Marianas Islands that you won't expect to find munitions of explosive concern, unexploded ordnance. You will, and the difference is we know how to deal with it now, and it's a much more streamlined process. And so that's a good news story. Still something that's very serious. We want to be able to operate, execute our mission, and operate safely. And so we value the processes that we have with our Navy partners, both and our contractors on site as well as up the chain, such as the NOSA and OPNAV and the Secretariat, and working with us collaboratively on dealing with munitions in Guam. The third one is access to labor. And so while this was originally very challenging with COVID, through ICE and getting approval for H-2B visas and labor on Guam, it's now opened up quite a bit more, and we've been able to deal with getting labor on site. And so I think it will remain a concern because we just have so much work going on. Nevertheless, we recognize it as a challenge, and again are meeting that head on, working with the Department of Defense, our Secretariat, as well as our collaborating with other government agencies that approve those visas to get the labor on site to do the work. Not to say that we don't have labor on island already, as well as expats and others that are going over there. It's a mix, but nevertheless, a good portion of our labor does come from through the H-2B visa program, and we have addressed that. So continued challenge, but nevertheless something that we've been able to thus far address positively.
All right, thank you, sir. So here's another question about turning to climate change. So the 2028 Summer Olympics, they're scheduled for Los Angeles, but given the increasing trends with heat waves, fires, power outages, I'll add on to this sea level rise, and of course ongoing hurricanes and storms. What are we doing to mitigate risks of world-class climate catastrophe happening in 7 years? which I know is a major concern for the NAVFAC Pacific.
Right. So yeah, I mentioned some of these in my brief. I'll elaborate a little bit more. So we do have a task force that's looking into climate change, in particular sea level rise, and offering recommendations to the department on how to best address that. Obviously, we'll have to figure out how to either redesign our facilities or raise them or something. You look at like Norfolk, for example, where the sea level is rising and starting to hit our utility lines. Well, cold seawater and hot steam lines just don't mix very well. And so we're going to have to address that. And so NAVFAC, as the Navy and Marine Corps Systems Command, is addressing that through a task force. And so I would expect to see more kind of planning efforts and a focused effort on solutions to resolve this issue where we have low-level facilities in terms of elevation that are most at risk. In terms of energy resiliency, we had the brownouts and the blackouts and things like that, and I've been as I've started to plan my transition and engage with industry and information sessions over the last couple months, I've been very impressed with where our nation's heading in terms of leveraging technology, artificial learning, artificial intelligence, machine learning, in terms of just where the technology, how much it's improving in terms of smart cities and smart grids, and how to better resource level our grids so that we don't have these blackouts and brownouts. And obviously, I mentioned cybersecurity is a big part of that. We still have concerns with our mission-critical facilities, not just within the department, but our infrastructure across the nation. And so we're going to have to continue to leverage the innovation and creativity. And one of the areas I've explored is with venture capitalists and private equity groups, and I've been exposed to a lot of this new technology, and I can just tell you it's very impressive. And that continues and will continue to be our competitive advantage as a nation in national defense, our ability to harvest and leverage that technology and innovation to incorporate into our defense, as well as our other areas where we have are delivering energy. I don't know how that shakes out. You mentioned the Olympics in 2028. I was more concerned about the ones that are coming up in Japan here this summer, but nevertheless, I like the idea of thinking longer term. So great question.
Absolutely, sir. Turning a little bit more towards some of the contract assignments, here's a question from Marcus Williamson. Says, with material shortages and significant price volatility, how is NAVFAC leaning forward to address price fluctuations? And similar to that, how is NAVFAC addressing the skilled labor shortfall the industry is feeling with an aging trade workforce?
Yeah, so another one of our former stellar performers, Marcus Williamson, was Civil Engineer Corps officer, and I'm not sure where you're at, today, Marcus, but always appreciate you and the talent you bring, and it's a great question. So first, let me address the materials and supply chain and how we are adapting to cost estimating. Well, it is a challenge for us. We had, where I said we've done great on our MILCON delivery. We did have, I think, 19 projects where we expect to perhaps miss the mark on our cost estimating. As you know, our system is a little bit cumbersome in that we have to program and plan and cost estimate a couple years in advance. That doesn't always translate into the OODA loop, if you will, for how fast our economy and supply material readiness change. And so a lot of risk there. And so what we're doing, again, is wherever we can, change our delivery system, provide more accurate cost estimates by engaging earlier. In other words, if we have a owner rep that we're to do business with in the federal government that submits a project and it gets programmed without NAVFAC's involvement, we consider that a higher risk than if you bring us on earlier where we can apply our talent. Not to say that we have the best talent in the world, we have equivalent talent. Our cost estimators are very talented. They're playing with a little different set of rules than perhaps when you submit a bid estimate because of the timeline. Nevertheless, again, a challenge, Marcus, that we're going to have to continue to face if we want to perform on plan. I think the second part of that was labor, and here's what I can tell you from that. We're in a competition with you, and you're in a competition with us, and our nation's in a competition with the world to develop STEM kinds of talent, engineers, planners, architects, mathematicians, and we recognize there's a shortage. And so what we've done on the NAVFAC side is, one, what can we do to streamline our processes through direct hire authority and make NAVFAC a great place to work, not only where somebody wants to come work, but knows that we'll take care of them, develop them, continue to give them meaningful, purposeful, challenging work, and develop them personally and professionally. And so we focused a lot of our effort on how to improve that. Obviously, like anywhere, we still have a challenge, but how do we improve our systems so that people want to come to work and stay with us? And so we're in direct competition. Ultimately, through organizations such as SAME, we have synergistic goals in leveraging our infrastructure and military engineers for national defense. Thank you, Marcus, and thank you for joining us today.
All right, thank you, sir. I think we've got time for one last question here. I know we're bumping up against our closing time here, so let me just get this one in, if you don't mind. This is from Curtis Haldeman. He says, can you provide additional details on the type of work targeted for the maritime operations and expeditionary construction? And can you give a brief explanation of NAVFAC places versus bases?
Yeah, I'll do it very quick. It's a great question. Thank you. Okay, so think about this. What does a Navy need, a military need, to fight an away game? All right, you can't have the tyranny of distance. It's just too far, right? So you have to be in places that are located closer, considering the adversary who gets a vote on where you put those locations. We want to be in multiple locations. That creates a targeting challenge. And we want to be able to do things like rearm, refuel, do reconnaissance, repair, revitalization, and change our people in and out. So you think about that in terms of a maritime service. We have to be able to repair our ships, submarines, and aircraft. We have to be able to rearm them, refuel them. Think ports and airfields in locations that are closer, but yet not too close. And that'll give you'll be on the right track there. And think about that across a broad swath of the Pacific, not just where we're operating today, but in South Asia, Southeast Asia, Oceania, and that's really where we want to be. Listen, Daniel, I got to run to another one. I want to thank the over 100 people or so that called in today. Again, my pleasure. Probably been the highlight of my day. And look, doors always open. Everybody's treated with the same equally. Same amount of time, same access. We want to continue to partner with you and learn from you. And we look forward to the further dialogue. Thank you so much for your engagement today. Thank you, Daniel, for the opportunity to continue to be part of SAME and present today.
Yes, thank you, Rear Admiral Adametz. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come here and present on what's happening at NAVFAC Pacific. A lot happening over there. Very exciting.
Right.
So
aloha and mahalo out here.
And with that, thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar. If you are interested in submitting an article to the military engineer, please feel free to visit our website with our editorial calendar and guidelines. We accept articles from anyone. You don't have to be a member of government or industry. You just have to be interested in military engineering and supporting our national security. We're currently accepting article proposals for our September-October 2021 issue that with a main focus on asset management with a special report on resilience and preparedness. The proposals are going to be due June 1st, so feel free to send those in. We would love to take a look over them. For further educational opportunities, if you're looking for them, registration's open for our National Virtual Joint Engineer Training Conference and Expo. That's starting on May 17th through the 21st. We'll also have upcoming webinars and further TME Presents events like this one in the months to come. Keep an eye on our national calendar to be alerted of those. Before you leave, please make sure to hop over to the Handouts tab where you can download your PDH certificate and the slide deck. So on behalf of SAME, the military engineer, and our featured presenter, thank you all for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.